Today we're going to be working with simplifying fractions. And we're actually going to be working with this all week. We are, at the beginning of the week, working with just simply simplifying them. And later in the week, we're going to be doing addition and subtraction with fractions. And when we do addition and subtraction with fractions, there are times where we are going to need to simplify our answer. So this is a really important skill for our students. So we're going to start off by just making a fraction. So I have on my board 6 different blocks, and if you'll notice that 3 of them are shaded, 3 of them are unshaded. So I'm just simply going to write the fraction 3, 6. So that is the number of fractions on, or that is the number of blocks on my board that are shaded, okay? When you simplify, you're thinking about your fraction in bigger pieces. So in other words, it's going to be simpler. So in this case, I'm going to think about this fraction in 2 pieces. I'm going to think about it as this half and this half. So this half is shaded, this half is not shaded, and since my original fraction 3/6 was about the shaded part, I can really say that 1/2 of my blocks are shaded. I know that these fractions are equivalent. I know they're the same because I can compare them like we did last week. I can circle them. I can cross multiply. 6 times 1 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. And when I do that, I can see that if I were going to add a greater than, less than, equal sign, I'd add an equal sign, and remember that even though they're equal, we're trying to use the word equivalent. Alright, so let me show you another fraction here. Drawing a picture is not actually going to work on most of the fractions where you have to simplify. So with little fractions, this could be a good strategy, but with most of them, you're going to have to do something else. So let me show you really quick. So I'm going to put up a fraction, and I'm going to use 32 over 40. Okay? So if this were a fraction, and this were a number that we wanted to simplify, there's going to be 2 steps in order to find the simpler fraction. Our first step is to find something called the greatest common factor of each number. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the bottom of my board, and I'm just going to make a list. Okay? And I want to make as complete of a list as possible, because the more I add to my list, the more numbers I get on my list, the easier this is going to be. If you don't get all the numbers on your list, you can actually not get the problem right. So again, this is greatest common factor, or GCF is what a lot of people call. And so what I want to think about is this. What numbers can I multiply together to get 32? And I'm just going to start making a list. So I always start off with 1 in the number. So 1 and 32. And then I have 2 and 16. I have 4 and 8. And that's all I can think of, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing for 40. So I'm going to say, all right, I know there's 1 and 40. I know there's 2 and 20. I know there's 4 and 10. And I know that there's 5 and 8. I'm kind of writing off the screen there. So now that I have my list, I want to look at my list, and I want to find the numbers that are the same. And I'm going to circle them, okay? So I have a 2, a 2. There's a 1 here, but I'm actually not going to circle it. And I'll explain why here in a couple of minutes. I have a 4, 4, and an 8, and an 8. Now, since this is GCF, greatest common factor, I want to pick out the biggest number that they have in common, which is right here. So it's the 8, okay? So this is my first step, was to make this little chart, pick out the number that they have in common that's the greatest. Now, my second step is I'm actually going to use that GCF, and I'm going to divide to simplify, okay? So I'm going to take my numerator and denominator, and I have to treat them fairly. Whatever I do to the top, I have to do to the bottom. I can't use separate numbers. So since I'm dividing the top by 8, I have to divide the bottom by 8, and that's because they have that number in common. So 32 divided by 8 is 4. 40 divided by 8 is 5. Okay? Now, a lot of times you want to make sure that your fractions in the lowest terms. And earlier down here, I started erasing, and I probably shouldn't have. I said that they had a 1 in common, and I didn't circle them, and I didn't say why. But I'm going to show you why here really quick. So, looking at the 4/5, you have like extreme zoom in on the 4/5 right now. Okay? If I did the same thing with 4/5, and I said, okay, I want to simplify 4/5. And I said, all right, what can I do to multiply 4? So I have 1 and 4, and then I have 2 and 2. What can I do to get 5? I just have 1 and 5, okay? In this case, the only thing they have in common is 1, but when I go to divide, if I take these numbers and I divide them by 1, I'm just going to get the same thing. So I know that this is as simple as I can go. But then the other thing that I know is if I go ahead, I make this chart, and I try to find my greatest common factor, and the only thing I can get is 1, then I can go ahead and skip this second step. Okay? So let me show you one more here, just to make sure. Okay? So let me show you this one. So I put down 24/40 seconds. And so what I'm going to do first, remember my first step is to put the numbers down. Okay? And I need to find the GCF. And I'm going to organize my numbers a little bit differently this time, and I'll show you a little bit better way if you like to keep your paper neat. So I'm going to start thinking of factors that I can multiply together. And this time, rather than writing them right next to each other, like I had before, the 1 and then the 24 would have been right here, I'm going to write them at opposite ends, just so I kind of keep them in numerical order. It's a little easier to pick out what they have in common if you do it this way, but you just got to leave a gap in between them. Some numbers have lots and lots of factors, okay? So I have 1 and 24, I have 2 and 12, I have 3 and 8, and I have 4 and 6, okay? And for the 42, I have 1 and 42, I have 2 and 21, I have 3 and 14, and I have 6 and 7, okay? So both these numbers have quite a few factors. So looking at what they have in common, they have a 2, they have a 6, and that's it. So looking at it, the 6 is clearly the highest. So again, this is my first step. My second step then is to come back up, and I'm going to divide it by 6. So 24 divided by 6 is 4. 42 divided by 6 is 7. So this is the simplified version, or the simple version of 24 over 42. So I hope this helps and explains a little bit better to you, and helps you guys out this week. So thank you.